We'll be gone, yeah. It's been an interesting week in my life. I don't know about you, but let's say it's a week, let's say an interesting month. 2 or 3 weeks ago, a family called me. Rob Flatness's grandmother-in-law was in the nursing home, and she was at the end of her life. She was just about gone. And the family wanted me to come up and have prayer with her before, with them and pray for her. And I went up and we all gathered around the bed and prayed. And before we prayed, I said, what do you want me to pray for? Do you want her to be able to stay with you a little longer? You want her to get her sanity, her mind clear so she can communicate with you? What do you want me to ask the Lord to do? And they said, let's just ask the Lord to bring her home. She's suffered long enough. Yeah. She's hurting, and her mind has been gone a long time. And they said, let's just ask the Lord to bring her home. And so that was my prayer. I just bowed my head, and I said, in a simple way, I said, Lord, you know best. But we just think it's time for this sweet saint to come home. Yeah. And see you and see those that's gone before her. I put my hat back on, walked out and got in my truck, and I live about 10 minutes from the nursing home. And by the time I got to my house, she had already gone home to be with the Lord. The Lord had answered that prayer. Well, I got on my bush hog that afternoon, and I was driving around thinking, it was quiet, not quiet on the bush hog, but it's quiet in my head, and I was running along out there and knocking weeds down and things, and then it dawned on me, Lord, you just answered a prayer just like that to take somebody home. You just answered a prayer. I said, why don't you do that sometimes to help make somebody better, or to let somebody live longer, or to answer? Well, I said, I just kind of got peeved at him a little bit. I said, well, why don't you answer another prayer another way? He said, I do. In other words, just as clear as he could to me, he let me know that I didn't have any business in that, telling him what to do, because he knew what was best, and I didn't. So I got it straight in my head there. Well, Keith and Laura, are you here? Get down here, girl. You got to tell us this story. But this is going to blow your socks off. This is about answered prayer. This is my neighbor, my good friend, Keith's best wife.
Oh, they go all the way
they
up,
do,
don't
they? Talk to us, girl. Oh, you want to talk to us? Tell us about this. What happened?
My name's Laura Dean. My husband and I sit in the Walnut Grove section. We've been coming here 3 or 4 years. You guys go all the way to the top. That's pretty cool. I just want to tell you a miracle that happened in our family recently. Sunday evening, we got a call that our son-in-law had been in a very, very bad car accident, and it wasn't good, and my daughter wanted me to come to the hospital. So I get there, and the doctor said that he had a fractured face, a broken neck, a broken back, a broken pelvis, a ruptured spleen, and they didn't know what other internal damage, and he was going to have to get a CT scan before he went into surgery. So while they took him to get the CT scan, I wanted prayers, just all the prayers that I could get. And I knew I didn't have time to call everybody individually, so I Facebooked that he had been in a horrible accident and we needed all the prayers and love that we could get. So he comes back from the CT, and about a half hour later I'm standing there holding his hand, and he is hooked up to IVs, he's got oxygen, he's on a heart monitor. I mean, it didn't even look like the kid that I knew. It was so scary looking. And he looks at me and he goes, Mom, don't worry. And I said, why? He said, because God's watching over me and everything's going to be okay, and I'm going to church and I'm going to wear my seatbelt. Because what had happened, their truck flipped 7 times and he didn't have his seatbelt on. So we just kept praying and praying, and the doctor comes in about an hour later, because you wait a lot when you're at the hospital. Yeah, a long time. And he comes in shaking his head, and his face has kind of got a funny look, and I'm thinking, oh crap, what now? We can't deal with any more bad news. Yeah. He goes, I don't understand what's going on. And I said, what do you mean, what's going on? He said, he shouldn't be here. And so, your heartbeat goes up, and you're just like, oh my gosh, what? And he goes, that CT was completely negative. He said, I don't understand what happened. I said, I do. That's called the power of prayer. And the doctor kept shaking his head. He goes, that boy must have an angel on his shoulder because he should not be here today. Right. And I said,
no broken bones.
Nothing broken. The CT was completely negative, and it was because of all those prayers that I asked for on Facebook from all of you, and we appreciate your support so much. So no matter what your trial is, just have faith. God has His own schedule of doing things. No matter what we think, He has His own way of doing it, His own time. And we're just so thankful for everything you guys do for us.
Thank you, Jesus. So whenever we got the Facebook message, many of you, we just said, God, help this boy. And God said, yes. Now, that week was continued. This is what's going on in my life. Okay? One said no, God said yes, but he took one home. Right? Yeah. He's not going to answer that prayer. I'm not going to let her stay here. I'm going to take her on home. Then he says yes. Now, then Brenda Farabee Facebooked me or emailed me or whatever again. And she said, Scotty, we're on our way to the hospital. Jeff's brother has had a stroke. And it's a bad one. And he's about 60 years old. And we want you to, I want you to post it, because she's the one that does a lot of our posting on the emails and Facebooks and things. She said, put it on there and get the people to pray. And so I put it on there, you know, Jeff Farabee's brother, and told us all I knew about it. And guess what? He died. His funeral will be tomorrow. 60 years old. God said no. Yeah. All right? God says yes. And God says no. Right. Now how do we square that? Yeah. How do we make sense of that? What does that do to our faith? See, here's the thing. Does it take more faith to deal with it when God says yes or when God says no? You know what I'm thinking? I think it takes more faith when God says no. Yeah. Sometimes we think we've seen a great work, but sometimes when God says no, we have to step back and say, God, I don't get it, but I trust you, I love you, and even though you said no, I'm going to love you and follow you. Now, God can say no to our prayers. Now, there was a guy in the Bible, his name is David. You've heard of David, right? Yeah. Well, David stayed home one time during the fall of the year when the kings went to war. David stayed home. And he was bored, I'm sure. And he was walking around on the top of his house. They have flat-roofed houses. He was walking around on his house one evening, and I'm sure he was bored and didn't have much to do. And he looked over a couple of houses over on another flat roof, and there was a woman taking a bath. And he really liked the way she looked. And he said, he sent one of his servants. He said, I want you to bring that woman up to me, to the house. Well, he's the king, okay? And whenever the king went, what the king wants, the king gets. So David lusted in his heart for this woman, brought her to him, and they had an illicit sexual affair that night. And they conceived a son, a boy. And it was a bad deal. I mean, it was sin, and there's a lot of other intrigue and murder and lying that went on about this. I don't want to get into that, but I want to just go on with the story, because the boy was born. The child was born. And he got sick. He got sick, and he was going to die, and David started praying. Now, while this was all going on, before the boy got sick, there was a prophet in the town by the name of Nathan. He was the nationwide preacher. He was the head preacher for that year. And he came to David. Now, I understand he's talking to King David, the king of the country. And Nathan is a prophet. And the king could have the prophet killed if he wanted to. He's the king. But the prophet Nathan comes to David, and he tells him a story. If you want to read it, you can turn to 2 Samuel chapter 12. And I'm going to read 2 chapter 12. I'm just going to kind of paraphrase it for you, but you can read it there. Nathan comes to him, and he tells him this story. He says, David, there was a man who was poor, and he had one little ewe lamb, and he loved that little lamb. He bought it as a very young lamb and had raised it. That lamb slept in his bed. That lamb ate out of his plate and drank out of his cup. I mean, he just loved that little lamb like one of his children. Yeah. He just was a pet to him, and he just loved that lamb. Yeah. And a rich man who lived nearby had guests visiting him from out of town. Well, the rich man went to the poor man, got his pet lamb, and killed it and served it as a meal to his rich guests from out of town. David just absolutely got mad and irate and said, that man ought to be killed. That man has done a terrible thing. Now here's where it turns.
Yeah.
Then that prophet had the nerve to put his bony finger right under David's nose. And he said, David, you are the man. You are the rich man that just killed the lamb. You just ate a poor man's lamb. You took a poor man's wife. You understand the story?
Yeah.
The prophet convicted him. Well, David was convinced and convicted. And he was broken at heart. But nevertheless, this thing had happened. Now, let's go on with the story. The boy started growing as an infant. Something happened and the child became sick. It got ill. And it declined in health. And it got sicker and sicker. David realized the boy looked like he could die. So David did what Jewish people did at that time. He began to fast and to pray. He prostrated himself on the floor. He laid out flat on the floor, face down, just laid out in prayer, in like burlap sack clothing and ashes to symbolize to God his intensity of prayer. He wouldn't eat. He didn't get up off the floor. He just laid there and prayed for God to heal the boy, to save the boy. Do not take the boy. Well, as you probably have guessed by now, God could say yes, or God could say no. And God said no to David's prayer. I'm not going to save the boy. The child is going to die. David's attendants, his servants, attendants, whatever, were standing nearby. And they knew the child had died. David was still in his chamber or in his place praying. He's laying there on the floor praying that God would save the boy. The attendants knew the child had just died. And they were saying, we need to go tell David the boy's dead. But I don't want to tell him. You tell him. No, you tell him. No, you tell him. No, you tell him. Yeah. I'm sure they passed that around a long time.
Yeah.
Finally, they went into David. Now, this is crazy. Now, we're going to use this story tonight for this sermon. And so they went into David and they said, David, I hate to tell you this, but the boy's dead. David did the craziest thing. He got up off the ground. He didn't throw a fit. He didn't go crazy. He didn't scream. He didn't run. He got up off the ground. He changed his clothes. Well, he took off the burlap sack clothes and the ashes. And he went and cleaned up, took a bath, showered, or whatever they do. He put on lotion. In other words, he cleaned up. He got to smelling good. He went to church. He went to the temple. And he worshiped God. Now this is important. Stay with me now. He went to church and he worshiped God. Then he came back home and he ate. He sat down at a table. He hadn't eaten, we don't know how long. He ate, he drank, he refreshed himself. He washed himself. He worshiped God. And then that's where we find the story. Now I want to jump back in to the story now and try to pull some of the points out of it that we're going to need to help you and me, because we need to know what to do when God says no.
Yeah, true.
I need to know.
Yeah.
You need to know.
Yeah.
What do we do when God says no? Not going to answer your prayer like you prayed it this time. Now remember, God has the option. He can answer any prayer, yes, no, or wait later. He never says maybe. He never says, well, if you'll. He always says yes, or no, or wait. I'll do it. In other words, I've got a plan later. But God can say whatever He wants. So what do we do? First thing I want to tell you, if you have just experienced the no, and God has said to you, no, I'm not going to answer your prayer at this time like you prayed it. You need to get up off the ground. You need to get up off the ground. You've been on the ground. You've been praying. You've had on the sackcloth. You've had on the ashes. You've not eaten. You've fasted. You've mourned. You've grieved. You've done everything you can do, and you're still laying there and you don't know what to do. I want to tell you that David picked himself up and got on with his life. I'm saying, get off the ground, get up, and get on with your life. Now, David did all that he knew to do. I mean, he did everything right. other than the an affair he had with Bathsheba. He did everything else right. And since that point, he did it like he was supposed to. And God still didn't answer his prayer the way he prayed it. Some people think, well, he didn't answer my prayer because I didn't do something right. If I'd have done this, or if I'd have done that, or if I'd have been more attentive or less attentive, or this or that. But David did everything right. And some of you are kicking yourselves around even tonight. If I'd have done this, or if I'd have been here, if I'd have done that, if I'd have said this, or if I hadn't said that, maybe, and you're saying, well, let me say to you, get up. Get up off the ground. It's time to let that go. See, when you're at the bottom, all you can do is get up. That's all. You can't go any lower. So just get up. Some of you remember I don't remember Pearl Harbor. I was born pretty close to that time, so I don't remember that, of course. But I do remember coming out of school one day and they told me John Kennedy had been killed. I remember that. And I sure remember when they attacked the Twin Towers. And I remember that our nation was driven to its knees. We were shocked. We were stunned. We were hurt. I know how we all felt. But what did our nation do as a nation? Well, we got up. We got up. We stopped looking back and we started trying to fix our problems. We went to war in World War II. You know, we had a new president. We went on with life. We got up. And I'm saying to you tonight, if you've been on the ground and you've been praying and God has answered your prayer no, and you don't know what to do next, I'm telling you, get up. Get up off the ground and get on with your life. Because that door is closing. That door is over. Now, the next thing I want you to notice, and I told you, was that David washed. He put on lotions. He changed his clothes. And he went into the house of the Lord and he worshiped. Then he went home and he had a meal and he ate. Do you notice what he didn't do? He didn't get mad at God.
Right.
So I'm going to say to you tonight, if God has said no to you, the next thing you need to do is not get mad at him. Right. If David could have said, I'm not going to go worship a God that takes my baby.
Yeah.
Why would I want to go to church and worship him? I'll never go to church again. Have you ever heard that? I'll never go to church again because God took my baby. God took my wife. God took my money. God took my job. God didn't treat me fair and I will never worship him again. So they get mad at God and so they leave God out. David didn't do that. He went to church. He worshiped. And I think he went there just to show everybody that he still believed in God. And he still believed in prayer. As I said earlier, sometimes it takes more faith to live after God says no than after he says yes. So David went to church. He went there to worship. Oh, I've known people in a bad situation who've said that and that they just went on. See, what you do after God says no is up to you. You get to choose. After God says no, then your choice is next. What do I do? You can lay there on the floor or you can get up. David got up. If you get up and get over it without lingering anger toward God, a great reward will be yours. Now, the next thing I want to share with you out of verse 21 is that I want you to accept the fact that sometimes God simply closes a door. I mean, he is done with that situation. It's done all that he wanted to do, and he just closes the door. I mean, he just shuts the door. We're not going to go that way anymore. I mean, that was a good way, but we're not going to go there anymore. And you pray, oh God, please, please. God says, the door is closed. Now, I'm going to explain what I mean by that. If you read with me, verse 21. His attendants asked him, why are you acting this way? While the child was alive, you fasted and wept. But now that the child is dead, you get up and eat. He answered, while the child was still alive, I fasted and wept. I thought, who knows? The Lord may be gracious to me and let the child live. But now that he is dead, why should I go on fasting? Can I bring him back again? No, can't bring him back again. See, when somebody dies, there is no remedy here on this earth. You don't bring them back. They don't come back. Right. When they die here, it's over. As bad as we hate it. Yeah. I mean, it's over. And we need to realize that. See, that bell can't be unrung. Once that bell has been rung, you can't unring that bell. Sometimes we just have to deal with it. I've studied the Kubler-Ross grief studies. I've gone through that course and studied what the stages of grief are. We start out with you know, I don't want to go through this, but we wind up at acceptance. When we go through all the stages of grief, the final step is accept it. And that's what David did. He accepted the fact that God had closed the door. That child was gone on to his reward. That child was gone to heaven. You know, all that he would have lived and loved and done was gone. It never was going to happen. God closed that door, never to be opened again. You see, our lives are one-way journeys here. We just go one way. We can't come back. We just go one way. Oh, a couple of 3 years ago, I thought I would bless my grandchildren, or maybe my great-grandchildren, and I bought a couple of pecan trees. They grow slow, and you know, it's going to take a generation. So I bought some pecan trees I want to plant for my kids and let them have them. Well, the stupid horse ate one of my pecan trees. You know what I'm talking about? He just ate my pecan tree. He could have had anything else to eat, but he ate my pecan tree. And I thought, well, there goes my pecan tree. Won't have pecans. Well, guess what happened this spring when I went down there to check it? It had come out from its roots. And it was just doing great. It's going to be just as good as the other one, I thought. So I'm going to have, unless the horse eats it again, I'm going to have pecan tree. So when a tree is cut down, it might grow back. But when a man or a woman or a child is gone, folks, they're gone. They're gone. God just closed, that door's closed. And we have to accept that. We can keep dragging around, but we have to accept it. So no matter what you do or what you don't do, nothing can change the fact that death is the end of this journey. This part of our journey is ended when people die. Now, the more completely we accept this, the more complete our recovery is going to be, and the sooner that it will be. See, death is not the end. Now, let me go back. I've said death closes the door. Death ends a chapter. But death for a human being that loves the Lord, for one who loves the Lord, death is just the very beginning of the journey.
Right.
See, this little old preliminary prelogue to the story we call 70, 80 years here, just a prelogue to the story. Yeah. Prelogue. It just kind of sets the stage. You know, there's not many adventures here compared to where we're going.
Right. This
is just the very beginning of it. How long do you think eternity is? Well, let's think about it in years for just a minute. You know, we're going to be somewhere 1,000,000 years from tonight. We're going to be somewhere. Think about that. 1,000,000 years. We're going to be somewhere. We're going to be somewhere 1,000,000,000 years from tonight. Physicists tell us that our sun, the Sol, our sun, will eventually use up its thermonuclear resources, its energy, and it will burn itself out and probably blow up and destroy the system. Do you know when that happens? We're going to be somewhere else. We're going to be somewhere alive, and we probably won't even care when that happens. Because we'll be so interested in what's going on in other things, in other worlds, in other dimensions, in other places, we can't even touch it. We can't even, eye has not seen, ear has not heard, neither has it entered into the heart of man, the mind of man, the things that God has prepared for His children. We don't even have a clue what's going to happen. But we need to know that death is not the end of the person. That baby that David had to say goodbye to, David knew that child didn't go to a grave and just lay there. He was going on to another place. He had a life to live. He had a journey to complete. He had things to learn. He had things to do. God just took him on. And David understood life didn't end when the child died. It's not the end, it's just the beginning. Life goes on to a better place. You're going to be reunited with loved ones. And when your time comes, you see, that's going to be where we really write our future. So I want you to know that God may have another plan for you. This is so important. This is really the most important part of the sermon tonight. The boy had a future. Who would he have been? Imagine that boy that died. What could he have been? Well, he'd have been the king of Israel. He'd have been David's heir. No doubt about it. Because Bathsheba, as we know later, turned out to be David's favorite wife. And so that boy that died would have been the king of Israel. But God closed the door on the future. Now, get ready for excitement. You know, let me just read it to you. Verse 24. Then David comforted his wife, Bathsheba. Remember I said God has another plan? He comforted his wife. That's Bible talk for he made love to her. Okay. And they gave birth to a son, and his name was Solomon.
Yeah.
So this boy, no, God had a different plan for him.
Yeah.
So they sent Solomon, and he's the one we know so much about.
Right.
This is King Solomon, David's son. So God closed the door, but he had something better in mind. He had another plan that he was working out on. And we've got to accept that and see that. Because sometimes, now this is the best part, sometimes no is an expression of God's love.
Yeah.
When God said no to us at the nursing home, it was an expression of love. He said that saint's hurt long enough.
Yeah.
That family's suffered long enough. No was an expression of love. I don't understand it. But this Farabee boy, when he went home at 61, that was an expression of God's love. I don't get it.
Right.
I would have said, no, let's let him stay a little longer. But that was an expression of love. We'll understand that one day. We don't now. Now, here's where I'm going to get to. I'm going to have to use a Hebrew word and explain what it means for you to get this last point. See, the Lord, I want you to know that no is an expression of love. It can be. Let me read it. This is verse 24 and then 25. The Lord loved him. Now, this is the boy that was born. And the new boy. The second boy. Bathsheba's second son, Solomon. And the Lord loved him. And because the Lord loved him, he sent word through Nathan. Who was Nathan? The same prophet that stuck the finger under David's nose and said, you're the man that stole the lamb. That same prophet, God said, go back and tell him this. I want you to name the boy Jedediah. He says, so? Well, guess what Jedediah means? Loved by the Lord. Loved by the Lord. God had a plan. God had another plan. And God will love the people, the product, the produce of that new plan. God will love that. God will use that. God will bless that. Because God has a better plan. And sometimes just plain old no is the best thing that ever happened to us in our life. I've had something horrible happen to me. You have too many times. And just about every time it's the best thing that ever happened to me. So when God says no, it's an expression of His love. Stop beating Him up. Accept it. Jedediah. Jedediah, of course, is the Hebrew name for Solomon. Okay, that was Solomon's name, was Jedediah. And it just says, and that means loved by the Lord. So what do you need to do? I don't know what you all need to do. First of all, move on. Get on with your life. Quit dragging it around. Because there's so much better coming. There's more coming. The Lord's loving us. He's taking care of us. He's blessing us. And when chapters close, when life closes, they're gone. They're closed. And let's move on. Because, like David said, I can't, that boy's not going to come back to me.
Right.
But I could go to him.
Right.
And remember that. Those people that we love, that have gone, they're not going to come back to us until the Lord comes back at the end of time.
Right.
But we can go to be with them in a much better place.
Amen.
With a greater future, a larger plan.
Yeah.
We can go there.
Amen.
So, it's okay to grieve,
Yeah.
but just grieve knowing God's got something fantastic waiting for us.
Right.
Lord, I'm going to thank